I want you to pause your usual way of thinking for a moment and set aside what your senses and past experiences keep telling you. Because I want to introduce a completely different way of seeing life. One that challenges everything you've been conditioned to believe about survival and struggle. Most people grow up believing life is a battlefield. They think everything is random, chaotic, and often against them. They look at failures, financial stress, heartbreak, and disappointment and conclude that the universe is either indifferent or unfair. From that mindset, life becomes a constant effort of fighting, pushing, and surviving. But what if that entire perspective is incomplete? What if it's not reality but just perception? Imagine instead that everything in existence, from the furthest star in the sky to your next breath, is part of a perfectly coordinated system working silently in your favor. Not against you, not randomly, but intentionally aligned with your highest outcome. From this viewpoint, nothing that has happened in your life is meaningless. Every delay, every rejection, every loss, every unexpected turn was not here to break you, but to position you. What looked like failure may have actually been redirection. What felt like loss may have been protection. What seemed like chaos may have been hidden order unfolding. The problem is that most people judge life too early. They react to incomplete information. A job rejection feels like defeat. A relationship ending feels like proof of unworthiness. A financial setback feels like collapse. But these are only fragments of a much larger picture that is still unfolding. If you could zoom out far enough, you would see that life has been adjusting, aligning, and reorganizing events around you with precision. Not everything that is delayed is denied. Not everything that leaves is a loss. Sometimes things are removed because they cannot go where you are going. When you begin to trust that there is an unseen intelligence guiding your path, you stop resisting life and start cooperating with it. You no longer assume things are happening to you but for you. This shift changes everything. Fear begins to lose its grip because you stop interpreting events as threats. Anxiety begins to dissolve because you are no longer obsessed with controlling outcomes. You start to realize that your life is not being randomly assembled, but carefully constructed through experiences you only later understand. Even your past begins to make sense in a new way. Moments that once felt devastating often reveal themselves as turning points that shaped your strength, redirected your direction, or prepared you for something better. The pattern becomes visible only in hindsight, but the invitation is to trust it even before it becomes clear. This is where a deeper discipline of mind is required. Instead of reacting emotionally to every event, you begin interpreting them differently. You start asking not why is this happening to me, but how is this serving my path? In doing so, you shift from being a victim of circumstances to becoming an observer of a larger process. Life stops feeling like something happening against you and starts feeling like something unfolding through you. At the core of this understanding is a powerful distinction between hoping and believing. Hope keeps you in waiting. It always places your desire in the future as something not yet available. Hope carries uncertainty, and that uncertainty keeps you in lack. But true belief is different. It is not waiting. It is not questioning. It is the inner acceptance that what you desire is already set in motion. It's the feeling of it is already done, even before physical evidence appears. When you live in hope, you constantly look for proof before you feel secure. But when you live in belief, your inner state becomes the proof itself. You stop chasing reality and start embodying it internally first. This inner state matters more than external conditions because your experience of life always mirrors your dominant assumption. When you assume lack, you experience more evidence of lack. When you assume alignment, you begin to notice alignment everywhere. There is also a transition phase between your inner belief and its physical expression. During this phase, life may appear uncertain or even chaotic. Things may shift, break apart, or reorganize in unexpected ways. But this is not failure, it is movement. What feels like disruption is often reconstruction. Old structures must dissolve before new ones can take shape. You may lose something familiar not because you are being punished, but because you are being relocated to something greater. The challenge is to remain steady during this in-between stage. Most people give up here because they misinterpret the process. They think things are falling apart when in reality they are being rearranged. If you can stay aligned during this phase, without panic, without resistance, you begin to notice that events start connecting in ways you didn't plan. The right people appear at the right time, unexpected opportunities emerge, and closed doors quietly lead you to better ones. Eventually, you begin to understand that you were never walking randomly. You were always on a guided path, even when it didn't look like it. And when this realization becomes your inner foundation, something powerful shifts in you. You stop forcing life. You stop fighting it. You start trusting it. And in that trust, you become calm, focused, and unshakable. Not because life is perfect, but because you no longer misinterpret its process. You realize that everything has been moving you forward, even when it looked like it was holding you back. Stay committed to the solution, even when you cannot see it yet. The path you are walking, this bridge between your current situation and your desired reality, is not something you have to design or control. It forms itself as you move. Your only responsibility is to keep going. If you are in a phase where nothing makes sense, where life feels uncertain, heavy, or even lost, understand this clearly: you are not lost. You are in transition. You are shifting from one version of yourself into another, and during that shift, the outside world temporarily looks unstable because it is adjusting to your inner change. Do not retreat just because the path feels uncomfortable. Rough moments are not signs of failure, they are signs that movement is happening. Resistance is simply the friction of transformation. Stay steady in your vision. Keep your inner focus aligned with what you decided is true for you, even if circumstances try to argue otherwise. The bridge only leads where your assumption points. It cannot take you somewhere random. If your inner belief is aligned with success, then even moments that look like setbacks are actually part of the route toward it. It might twist, pause, or appear confusing, but it is still moving you forward. Trust that process. Let's bring this into real life. There are moments when people feel completely defeated: financial pressure, emotional breakdown, life falling apart at every angle. In such a state, even sincere effort can feel useless because it is driven by fear instead of alignment. The real shift happens when you stop reacting to lack and start embodying the feeling of the solution. Instead of constantly asking for relief, you begin to feel relief internally, as if the problem is already resolved. That feeling becomes your anchor. You stop identifying as someone trying to escape problems and start embodying someone who already overcame them. You don't search for abundance, you mentally occupy it. You don't chase stability, you internally settle into it. At first, nothing may change externally. Life may remain quiet, even unchanged. But internally, something begins to shift. Anxiety starts to loosen. Pressure begins to fade. A subtle sense of stability replaces panic. That inner shift is the real beginning of transformation. Then life starts reorganizing itself in unexpected ways. Opportunities appear from places you were not watching. Old connections resurface. New paths open without force. It looks like coincidence, but it is alignment responding to your internal state. The key realization is simple: the world is not creating your experience randomly. It is reflecting your dominant inner assumption. When you change internally, the external has no choice but to follow. This is why struggle is not necessary. Forcing outcomes only reinforces lack. But living from the feeling that what you want is already real changes your entire expression. You stop begging life and start embodying it. And the strongest tool you have in this process is your inner dialogue. The constant conversation you have with yourself is not harmless, it is creative. It is shaping your next experience. If your inner speech is filled with doubt, fear, and limitation, your outer life will mirror that tone. But if you consciously change that dialogue to reflect the reality you desire, your life begins to reorganize around it. Instead of saying, "I don't have it," you shift into the tone of, "It is already mine." Instead of rehearsing problems, you rehearse the feeling of resolution. You speak within yourself as the version of you who already succeeded. And when doubt appears, you don't argue with it, you redirect it. You replace it with a higher inner conversation that matches the identity you are choosing. Another powerful shift comes when you stop relying on hope and move into certainty. Hope always waits. It always looks for something outside itself to confirm it. But certainty already feels complete. Hope says, "I wish it happens." Certainty says, "It is already done." That difference changes everything. One keeps you in waiting, the other places you in possession. When you embody certainty, your mind relaxes. You no longer search for signs or validation. You begin to live as if the outcome is already settled, even if nothing around you has changed yet. This is where most people struggle: the gap between inner change and outer reflection. During this gap, life may still show old conditions. But those conditions are just echoes of your past thinking. They are not predictions of your future. What you see today is delayed information. It is the result of old assumptions playing out. When you change internally, you are creating a new direction, but the physical world takes time to catch up. That delay is where many people give up, thinking nothing is working. But in truth, it is the most important phase, the adjustment period where reality is reorganizing itself. If you remain steady in your new inner state during this phase, everything begins to align naturally. Events connect, timing adjusts, and solutions appear without force. So, the real mastery is not in forcing change but in remaining faithful to the new identity you have chosen, even while the old evidence still appears. Keep walking, keep assuming, keep trusting the unfolding, because what looks like delay is actually construction, and what feels like uncertainty is actually the bridge forming beneath your feet. What you must understand is this: reacting to your current circumstances is like reacting to a shadow or a ghost. The moment you emotionally respond to lack, pain, or loneliness, you are actually reviving the very state you want to leave behind. You give it attention, and in doing so, you keep it alive in your experience. A higher level of awareness works differently. It sees two realities at once. On the surface level, you might see an empty bank account, a broken situation, or something missing in your life. But on a deeper level, you hold a different vision, an internal certainty that something greater already exists beyond appearances. And true mastery is when you choose to trust that inner vision more than the outer illusion. This is not easy because your senses are loud. They constantly try to convince you that what you see is final. Pain feels real. Absence feels real. Problems feel immediate and urgent. I am not asking you to deny their existence in the physical world, but I am asking you not to let them define your future. You can acknowledge a situation without accepting it as permanent. You can say, I see this, but I refuse to believe this is my final outcome. That is inner strength. That is persistence. Persistence is not forcefully fighting reality. It is quietly standing firm in a higher truth that is not yet visible. Think of it like being in a storm. You may feel the wind and rain, but you don't let it enter your inner world. You stay rooted in your vision no matter what is happening around you. That stability is what creates transformation. There is a natural delay between what you assume internally and what appears externally. This delay is where most people give up. They assume something positive, but when they don't see instant proof, they panic and return to doubt. But the truth is, during this gap, everything is already being reorganized behind the scenes. To explain this simply, imagine pregnancy. When conception happens, there is no immediate physical proof. Nothing looks different at first, but life is already forming. If someone judged the situation too early, they would misunderstand the entire process. Your desire works the same way. The inner assumption is the conception. The unfolding in time is the growth period. If you react negatively during this stage, you interrupt the process emotionally. But if you stay steady, you allow it to develop naturally without resistance. The visible world takes time to catch up with the invisible shift that has already occurred within you. This is why setbacks during this phase are not failures. They are often part of the rearrangement. What looks like things falling apart may actually be things being removed so something better can come through. But if you panic and resist, you slow down the process. Instead, you must learn to interpret events differently. A closed door is not rejection, it is redirection. A delay is not denial, it is alignment happening in a way you cannot yet see. Your job is not to control the path, but to remain consistent in your inner state while the path unfolds. The real test of strength is not when life is easy, but when everything seems uncertain and you still hold your vision. Anyone can stay positive when conditions are favorable. But true power is when nothing around you confirms your belief, yet you still remain steady within it. At that level, you stop being controlled by external conditions. You stop reacting like a mirror that simply reflects everything around it. Instead, you become the source that sets the tone. You decide the direction from within, regardless of what the outer world shows. So when you find yourself in difficult moments, don't collapse into the appearance of failure. Don't treat temporary conditions as final truth. Walk through them with inner certainty, knowing they are not permanent states but passing phases in a larger unfolding. Stay aligned with what you decided internally. Trust the process even when you cannot see it. Because what looks like delay is actually movement, and what feels like uncertainty is often the beginning of real change forming beneath the surface. From this moment, the real discipline begins. You are not here to negotiate with negative thoughts, and you are not here to entertain them. You are here to take full control of what enters your mind. The rule is simple. Any thought that does not align with your highest state is not allowed to stay. A negative thought may appear, but you do not invite it in. You do not sit with it. You do not argue with it. You treat it like a spark landing on your skin. You remove it instantly before it leaves a mark. No analysis, no story, no emotional spiral. Just immediate release and redirection. If financial fear appears, you don't calculate your problems or fall into panic. You stop the chain completely and replace it with a stronger truth. Supply is not limited. If loneliness appears, you don't dwell in it or build a story around it. You replace it with the feeling of being supported, valued, and connected. This must become your reflex. Not occasionally, not when it's easy, but every single time the mind tries to pull you back into old patterns. And make no mistake, your old mental habits will resist this change. The mind is used to drama, fear, and emotional chaos. It will try to drag you back into that familiar state because it has lived there for years. When you begin this mental discipline, expect resistance, expect emotional noise, expect sudden problems appearing out of nowhere. That is not failure. That is the old identity fighting to stay alive. But you are not required to participate in it anymore. You are essentially retraining your entire inner system. And like any deep retraining, there will be friction at the beginning. But every time you refuse to react, you weaken the old pattern. Every time you choose alignment instead of fear, you strengthen your new state. Think of it like guarding the entrance of your mind. Not every thought is allowed inside. You become selective. If a thought carries fear, doubt, or limitation, it does not pass. Only thoughts aligned with love, clarity, strength, and possibility are welcome. If you break this discipline, you don't punish yourself, you reset. You acknowledge the slip and begin again. But understand this clearly. Repeating the cycle of negative indulgence comes at a cost. It delays your transformation. It pulls you back into the same loop you are trying to escape. This is why discipline matters, because every reaction you make is shaping your future experience. A single moment of emotional surrender to fear can rebuild an entire cycle you were trying to break. As you practice this, something interesting happens. Your external world begins to respond differently. The people who used to engage you in negativity may no longer connect with you the same way. Conversations change. Drama loses its pull. Certain connections may fade naturally. Do not resist this. You are not losing anything real. You are simply outgrowing patterns that no longer match your new frequency. Your environment is adjusting to your inner shift. At the same time, your focus must also be protected from external influence. You cannot maintain clarity while constantly feeding your mind with chaos, fear, and negativity from the outside world. What you consume mentally matters just as much as what you think internally. The world often tries to convince you that your life is shaped by external forces like your background, your genetics, the economy, or pure luck. But those are only surface level influences, like shadows moving across a wall. The deeper truth is that the main cause of everything in your experience is your own consciousness, your own imagination. When you truly understand that you are the operant power, you stop searching outside yourself for something or someone to rescue you. You realize the creative intelligence you've been looking for was never above you or outside you. It has always been within your own mind. Every time you say, I am, you are expressing the presence of consciousness itself. And whatever you attach to those words becomes a command to your reality. If you say, I am tired, I am broke, or I am unlucky, you are unknowingly using that creative power to reinforce limitation. And because the universe responds to your state without resistance, it simply reflects back what you consistently assume. It does not judge, argue, or correct you. It only mirrors your inner direction. This is why this truth carries such weight. You have been using this creative power every single day, but most of the time unconsciously. You were not aware that your thoughts and assumptions were shaping your direction, so life felt random, even unfair. It is like driving without awareness, then blaming the road for every crash. But the moment you become conscious of this, you take your hands back on the wheel of your life. And with that realization comes both freedom and responsibility. If there is no external force controlling your reality, then there is also no one left to blame. Not your parents, not your boss, not the government, not your circumstances. The moment you blame something outside of you, you surrender your creative authority to it. You declare it has power over your life. But once you accept that you are the source, everything changes. Because if you created your current situation, consciously or unconsciously, then you also have the ability to recreate it. If imagination brought you into limitation, imagination can also lead you into expansion. The same mental energy that builds failure can build success. There is no extra effort required to imagine abundance compared to imagining lack. The mechanism is neutral. Only your direction changes the outcome. This is where everything shifts. You are no longer a background character in your own story. You are the author, the director, and the one living the role. Life is not being written by fate. It is being written by your assumptions and inner beliefs. The moment you accept this, you step out of helplessness and into creation. And do not mistake simplicity for weakness. The mind prefers complexity because it avoids responsibility. It wants long explanations, hidden systems, and external causes. But the truth is closer than anything you can reach. It is your awareness itself. The only real gap between who you are now and who you want to be is the state you consistently assume. Once you shift your assumption, life begins to reorganize itself around that new identity. What is often called the bridge of events starts unfolding naturally. But you must be the one to begin. You must dare to assume what is not yet visible. That requires courage. Not physical courage, but the courage to stand firm in your inner reality even when outer conditions disagree. It is the courage to say, I am successful while circumstances still show delay. It is the courage to say, I am healthy while discomfort still exists. Not as denial, but as creation. Because what you consistently occupy in consciousness is what life eventually reflects. As you move forward with this understanding, your old mental patterns will try to pull you back. Doubt, fear, and old habits will rise again. But in those moments, pause and remember, you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness observing them. If you are the observer, then you also have the ability to choose what stays and what goes. Do not fight your mind. Guide it. Do not argue with negativity. Replace it. The moment you notice a limiting thought, you do not entertain it or analyze it, you shift. You return to the state you choose to live in. You remind yourself of the version of you that already has what you desire. Over time, this practice changes everything. Life begins to feel less rigid, less fixed. Situations that once felt permanent begin to shift. People respond differently. Opportunities appear unexpectedly. Not because the external world suddenly changed on its own, but because your inner state stopped feeding the old pattern. Even fear-based inputs like news, gossip, or collective anxiety lose their grip when you stop feeding them attention. Your mind becomes a protected space again, shaped by intention instead of reaction. And in that space, clarity returns. When you maintain this inner discipline, something subtle but powerful happens. Your experience starts aligning with your chosen state. Not instantly, not always in obvious ways, but consistently enough that you begin to notice a pattern. Inner stability creates outer harmony. This is when you realize you were never trapped. The limitations you experienced were not fixed laws, they were reflections of past assumptions. And once you change the assumption, you change the reflection. You are not here to be a victim of life's conditions. You are here to participate in its creation. The moment you accept that you are the source of your experience, you reclaim your power completely. No longer waiting, no longer hoping, but consciously deciding. So stand in that awareness, choose your state deliberately. Let your inner conversation reflect the life you intend to experience. And even when the physical world lags behind, do not abandon your inner direction. Because in the end, reality always follows consciousness. And the moment you fully accept that you are the I am, you stop asking life what you are and start telling life who you are becoming. Everything returns to one simple truth. Your inner state is the foundation of your entire reality. When you finally realize that you are the operant power, you stop living as a victim of circumstance and start living as the creator of experience. Nothing outside of you holds the final authority over your life unless you give it that power. So choose your thoughts with awareness, hold your vision with faith, and refuse to surrender your direction to doubt or fear. Because the moment you truly live from I am, your world begins to reshape itself around the life you already decided to become.